Okay, so today we're going to be talking with my friend Andra, and she has been a part of the inner dance community for some years now. I first met her in Copenhagen back at the end of 2018, and have had some really beautiful chances to sit with her one-on-one and spend time together and just learn from her experiences and many of the different things that came up with for her in this journey, taking her into a state of looking at a master's program and getting a little bit more involved in the academic side of all of these energy connections and conversations that we often open in inner dance contexts, just to see where it goes or see what's already there, or see how we can make a little bit more tangible the things we're experiencing. So, Andra, I'd love if you could just give us a little background about yourself, what kind of things you're working on, or anything about your experiences that have just led you to this moment where these articulations are flowing through you the way that they do, or anything that has just been a part of your recent connections to planet, Earth, self, the changes we're all going through. Yeah, anything you'd like to share about that?
What I'd like to maybe share is that for most of my life, up to I think about 4 or 5 years ago, um, I was very atheist, like super agnostic. I frowned upon anybody who would have a spiritual mindset as simply thinking that they must be crazy. They must just not have understood reason yet. They just must not have a good grasp of the scientific method. And then a very surprise experience catapulted me into 3 months of being in an absolute spiritual, blissful state where I began to connect with my body and the bodies of others in a way that completely shook my worldview. So once that happened, I basically hit the ground running and I tried to find out as much as possible. And I have done multiple trainings from energy practices to coaching and psychology, to finally land into studying transpersonal counseling and a master's program in consciousness to help me look at the experiences that are available to humanity, that this wasn't something that this was personal or something that my brain created, but that there is something intelligent, a web that links us all and that we can co-create with, something that is very purely magical. And in terms of what brought me here, beyond what was 4 years or 5 years ago, I don't know. I mean, obviously the whole life and my whole ancestors and where it's leading, I have no idea either. So let's see.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to be asked to be shared these questions around, introductions, and then to put a lifespan and then something that came before and something that will come after, and then all of what is impersonal, and to put it in a few short words, right? Like, how does one translate that? Mm-hmm. Like, do I say that, like my ancestors are land people, that they were and are very deeply connected to the weather and the earth and growing and sustenance, that is something that's important. That they have wisdom of herbs and healing capacity like that my 85-year-old grandmother still goes foraging in the forest for certain plants in Romania, like she still does that. So yeah, and then here I am in Canada feeling like very highly disconnected from the land and trying to plant myself with daily prayer in with the directions and realizing, what's around me. Okay, to the west is the setting sun and the Pacific Ocean, and to the south is the Californian fires, right? And the north is the Rocky Mountains, right? Like, how do I plant myself in space?
Yeah. I'm going to circle back just to like one quick thing that you had shared before to see if we could pick up from here. The last time we were conversing, you had spoken about this anger and the feeling of how it moves through the body, and it starts to like heat up the blood, or you can feel the warmth in one's face, or this sense of something really deep inside the heartbeat, or the rhythms of instinct that seem to bring something else to the surface. It's not just an emotion, it's an entire experience. And there's a way of connecting with that experience. So the more that you're in it, the less overwhelming it is to have it. But it takes a lot to get past the initial storyline that drives the emotion forward, as compared to the pause or the self-observation within that moment that gives a bird's eye view of the whole situation, so that the narrative elements aren't as strong in the force of that emotion. The emotion has a bit more space from the story and can be felt for itself as it is in the uniqueness of that expression, and not need to feel entangled or tied to whatever is actually happening in the 3 dimension.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think for me, my practice of meditation has been extremely helpful, useful, supportive to help to not go into the narrative. Because even in a silent, open awareness meditation, right, just sitting still, there's so many stories that go in the mind, and one can latch onto them and get lost for 5 minutes, and then, oh right, shit, I'm supposed to be meditating, right? Like come back to the body, come back to the breath, or whatever the focus point is. And how about like doing that with emotions, right? Like feeling the trigger, like, maybe it's a movie, right? Like, whoa, the sound, whoa, the images, whoa, the storyline that's triggering something within me, and detaching from that storyline and allowing the awareness to go in and feeling, okay, there's activation. Like, how does this feel, right? Like for me, it feels like there's literally like a pump that goes all the way, like down the central channel, from sort of like the sacral to really to the heart, maybe sometimes to the throat. And it's like it's in the middle of the body, and it feels so activating and so tense, and it just pumps, and it just goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. It's so activated. So like, how do we just be with that, right? And initially, like for me, I remember first like tapping into like anxiety and realizing that like I have a lot of anxiety in me, and the vibrations of anxiety like in the heart and the belly like can be quite scary if that's the first time that is being felt in the body, right? Like, there's so much movement in the body, there's so much vibration, there's so much um titillations, what's that word? What is it?
Yeah, titillating and
Titillating?
titillation. Yeah, yeah,
Titillations?
yeah, that works.
Um, yeah. So that is scary for me anyways. Like I wasn't, I wasn't brought up to pay attention to my emotions or to my body or to feel energy flowing in the body. That wasn't something that was taught to me via culturally or through my family, um, or teachers or anything until I stumbled it across by myself. And all of a sudden realizing like, wow, there's a lot of movement in the body that is just continuously vibrating,
Mm,
right? And it's interesting because each emotion begins to have its own like experience in the body. And it doesn't matter what brought it up, like even, grief, right? Like sure, I could pinpoint it to something that my grandmother or my great grandmother experienced decades ago, but I felt the grief before I knew the story. So
mm,
then is it actually connected to that, right?
mm,
Is my grief because we're raping this planet? Is that why my grief is? Is my grief because I really want to live in community and I don't have that? And that sits
mm,
in the heart, right? Like what is it connected to? I have no idea. Maybe everything, right? Maybe
mm,
all of the above. And then um taking the opportunity when any emotion can be expressed or felt, as opposed to saying, "Oh, I have to do this right now," right? I have to read or I have to go to a class or whatever. Could I just take 10 minutes and show up late to the 3D reality and just like cry for a couple of minutes with this grief?
mm,
Can I place my hand on my heart and just like feel the pain that is so, it's tactile. It's not even like it's heavy and it's deep and it's just painful.
mm,
But just taking the time to just sit with it instead of trying to put a label on it of this is what it means or this is what it could mean or this is its cause or whatever. Like, does it matter? I don't know if it really matters.
mm,
I'm starting to think that it doesn't, honestly. And that the actual experience of what's being felt is more important than the story that we create about it. I think stories can be really, really important after the fact to help us integrate whatever experience we had, to put it into a language that then it can go into a memory bank and say, okay, this is what happened. I understand it. But in the moment, as much as we can stay away from the story and just stay with whatever is being felt in the body, um, yeah.
mm,
I was talking to a kid the other day. I was talking about anger, and I don't know how we got to talking about anger, and he's like 6 years old. And I was like, it's like, yeah, how does anger feel? Like for me, I get really, really hot when I get angry. Like my hands get hot, my feet get hot, my face goes all red. And I was like, how does it feel for you? And he's like, cold. And I was like, oh, that's interesting.
mm.
Like,
Yeah.
is it just a lack of awareness? Or is it just a different connection, right? Like maybe anger for him is a coldness because it freezes and all of his energy goes into the center and his outer extremities just get so cold because they get numb basically, right? Versus for me, like the inner fighter comes out, that warrior comes out, so then I get ready to like battle anytime that
Mm,
I'm angry. Like I'm not, if I'm angry, I'm not getting ready to retract and go sit by myself in my anger. Like I'm getting ready for like to combat somebody, right? And maybe that's like my
mm.
Slavic Romanian like fiery warrior nature. Yeah. And even sometimes like knowing that there's something there, like all of today, I've been like, what am I feeling? What am I feeling? What am I feeling? I have no idea what I felt today. I've been sitting with a headache for the whole entire day. And even now, like if you ask me like, how do I feel? Like, I guess I feel a little excited, a little grounded, right? But like there's no like overpowering like emotion that I feel right now. But I know that there's something there. Like I know it's like under the skin, there's something there. Maybe
Mm,
like I don't know, maybe a discomfort, maybe a worry. I don't have a word. I don't have a word for it. But there's something there, right? So then it's like even sitting with that, like how do we sit with that curiosity of like what is there, but I can't put a word and I don't understand.
mm. I feel a lot of what I sense under the surface in a way that I can't place a specific emotion to right now. But I want to. It's like I want to, but and I know there's something there, and I'm very aware of it. And maybe sometimes there's all these other emotions connected to it, and I'm familiar with the personalization of those emotions in my 3D environment. So I give you an example. I'm not. I'll go back to like the thing that I think it actually is for me, but I'll start with just some of the other side emotions that are connected to it. Restlessness. That's one of them. This feeling of restlessness. It's not as much an anxiety or a nervousness or an irritation, but there's something restless in the energy at times, and it feels very, very strong. And I know in my 3D world what to do with restlessness, right? I either ground or I go do something active or I give myself permission to just go crazy for a little while, run around and dance, whatever it might be, right? And I can deal with the restlessness. But it's not getting to the direct core of what the thing is. It's like it's feeding some of the symptoms. So another one might be the sense of needing to take action. Like even in a version of, okay, well, if I want to be in community, then and I don't have it right now in quite the same way that I feel like I want it in my life, do I take action at this very moment? Do I allow myself to get through this transition? Do I just start, like baking it in the oven and giving the energy a chance to turn into a cake? And then as long as I'm feeding it the right ingredients, I'll get a cake at some point. Um, and yeah, and I feel a bunch of these kind of things. For me, the part that I've been working through energetically in that emotional charge of something but not being able to pinpoint it does feel like it has a lot to do with these generational imprints, but also what is the emotion in a detachment from the stories, like you're saying, when it doesn't have to have a narrative. It's okay. There can be narratives there, but it really has to do with like, what is the energy I feel inside of me? Like I've seen in family constellations how going into a part of the story where the charge is very strong can help to relieve the charge by putting a love input. And once there's a love input into the part of the story that has been hidden or never got spoken or got lost in translation along the way, all of these different things, right? The children of the immigrant ancestors have a very different story than the ones that never left their country. So the charges are still there. Like someone feels a sense of loss, someone feels a sense of not knowing their home, and now it's all in there, and it doesn't really matter which storyline we look at. The emotions are what we're working with, right? So the big one that keeps coming up is nostalgia. And when I recently looked at a way to just define this better for myself, it actually made it even more tricky because there are some emotions, and nostalgia is one of them, that has completely opposite connotations associated with the same thing. So there are some some things that are like that. Nostalgia, it's either this feeling that there's a loss, there's a lack, there's a hopelessness or a helplessness, something that is being pulled forward from the past. Like, I can't do it. Like, when I was a child, this happened to me. Or the feeling that whatever it was that was then and isn't now was the cause of happiness as to why now is so sad. So there's the longing, and that can be really negative, or it can be charged with a lot of really low vibrational emotions. But the other side of nostalgia is very positive. It's the one thing that the psychologists would say leads to a very deep sense of resiliency. It's something that can really charge us and give us hope. It can really make us feel alive in those memories and emotions that made us feel so good, but without the attachment to the story of why it felt so good. It's like you take the entire thing with you into right now. So only if it's like looking back in hindsight and feeling that there's something missing, that it can go into the depressive quality of nostalgia. Otherwise, there's a lot of joyfulness in it. So it's funny how this one emotion holds such a balance if we can have it. Otherwise, it can feel very torn between these two polar opposites as to what does this even mean inside of me. And I think the last year and a half or more at this point has really made people sit still and feel things. And I feel like this one can be very confusing because there's so many of these other energies attached to it, right? If you look back in nostalgia and want the life that you had before the economy crashed or before someone's parent died or whatever it might be, there might be a lot of anger, there might be a lot of grief, a lot of other sorrows and sadnesses, or a sense that like there's a lot of pain to go through, and that might not feel so nice right now. It's like the longing for something that was. So I do feel like it's really important then, as we're feeling these feelings, to also notice why is it coming up now? Not just like what does it feel like, but why is it coming up? What are we sorting through? Are we aware that we're sorting through things, or do we just think that we're feeling them, right?
Yeah. And that's been the grief part for me, because it's definitely experience it and feel it, but also be conscious that there's a lot of planetary and non-planetary forces that are encouraging this to emerge at this moment right now, right? That there's so much support for the expression of these in the sorting, in the understanding. But the understanding and the sorting can, I believe, can only come after the experience of it, of really sitting in it, really feeling it, really getting acquainted with it, right? And then we can begin to integrate it, and then we can understand what it's connected to, what does it mean, or any of that, for sure. And then realizing that they're not scary, right? Like, grief is not scary, anger is not scary. It's they're just emotions. Like, can we just step back from thinking that happiness is the only thing that's wanted in our system? Who told us that? Like, who fed us that lie? Right? Like, grief is so beautiful. It's so connecting. Like, when I see another person authentically express their grief, I feel much more connected to that person than I do if they're expressing their absolute joy. because it makes me realize, like, oh, the grief that is in me is in this person as well. And there's a strong connection, heart to heart, instantly. And even anger, right? Like, what does anger tell us, right? Like, what are we sorting through anger? Sure, okay, I get angry. Let's feel it. It's telling us that something's not right, whether a boundary has been crossed or we're lying to ourselves. There's something that needs to shift, right? There's something that needs to change, whether, you know, in a relationship with other or with self or with planet, right? Like my anger at what is going on to this planet and the trees that are getting cut down, like that's anger, right? Or the fact that, you know, there's no old growth trees around where I live. I live on a mountain. Behind me is just pure forest, right? Like bears and cougars and coyotes and raccoons and pheasants and eagles and hawks, etc. There's no old trees. And then sitting in circle with a group of women, and there were 6 of us, and we were asked to share a picture of, like, as a reflection of the journey that we've been on the past 6 months. 3 out of the 6 had images of trees. Like, to what extent are the trees calling out to us? Right? So then I feel angry that I can see the stumps of these old growth trees, and I can see where people like stuck ledges in so that they could climb up on these ledges and chop it down properly, whatever that means. And then to realize that there's no more grandmother trees, and to feel like right? Like to feel that deep in my belly, like not just that the injustice and the pain and the grief, but like the anger at the eradication of wildness. And then to see that reflected back in nature, and then to, you know, to reflexively take it back into myself and into my system, and thinking, how do I connect to the wildness inside of me? What wild parts have I cut off? To what extent can I be angry? There's been a scream that's been dying to come out of me for years, and I have not found the place to do it.
Wow.
And sure, I can dance with the scream, I can dance with anger, right? And then having it transmute into something else through that movement. But there's something that's deeply primal in expressing an emotion via sound, and a very deep, wild, primal scream that really taps into the anger that's not just mine, right? Like it's my family's, it's my ancestors, it's my neighbors, it's the earths, it's the trees, it's the children that are not going to see this. Emotions are so powerful, and to think that we only want joy, like, what absolute bullshit. What absolute bullshit. Like, all of them are so powerful and so absolutely beautiful in their own right, right? Like, we don't look at trees and think, oh, only a willow is beautiful, right? I have a willow right in front of me, so that's why I said that.
I love willows.
I do too. My grandma stole this one out of a park.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
She's pretty crazy and wild. But anywho, right? Like, we don't look at a tree and think like only willows are beautiful, right? Or that only redwoods, because they live so long, are beautiful. Like, we look at them all in their diversity and appreciate them for what they are. Like, can we do that with our emotions as well? Can we appreciate grief and not think that, oh, I'm bad, I'm melancholic, oh, how terrible to be sad? like, this is a deeply sad time on this earth. Let's not shy away from it, and let's be with what is present.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really nice to speak with someone who has such a deep connection with the emotions, because I do feel like a lot of the mechanisms for survival that have been imprinted within us, as you were saying before, it just, as a child, you weren't given permission or instruction on how to experience your own emotions. Um, for me, I I was told not to feel them. No, stop feeling that way. No, turn that one off. Oh, big girls don't cry. If you want to act that way, go to your room. Don't talk to me like that. That's inappropriate. No, that isn't how you actually feel. What you really feel is this. This is just your imagination, or this is you just being too sensitive. And I was told that I was too sensitive many times as a child, that I was just being way too sensitive. And it's really hard if you are a highly sensitive person to be told that you're too sensitive. But back then, I don't really think we had that vocabulary to even create a safe container for people that do have high sensitivity. And so there was no safe place to have all of these feelings. And they're not just feelings that are emotions, they're feelings in the body, they're feelings that, like, you know when something even very small has shifted in the vibratory field or the emotional field, because you just get goosebumps on your skin in like 2 seconds when something is changing, or when you know something has shifted. The ability to feel what other people are saying rather than what their words are saying. The sound of our voice speaks our emotions, but most of the time you have to be really highly trained to pick up on emotions that are being spoken in between people's words. But when you're constantly feeling what somebody's not saying rather than being able to listen to the words, it's very confusing, like you're hearing something totally different from them than what is coming out of their mouth. Which one are you supposed to believe, right? Because then it's like, wait, but are you sure that's what you feel? Because as a child, if I said that back to someone, of course, the insecurity in them made them stick to their reality of words way more than what they were feeling. So then instantly they would try even harder to cover up what they were really saying, because they needed to now convince me, because I was so sensitive to what wasn't being spoken. They're like, oh shit, like she doesn't believe me, damn it, now what do I do? Right? Like, okay, come on, small child, let me just like la 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 you, and like puppet you back into belief of what is real based on what I believe I want it to be. And these are really funny manipulations too, right? And it's because it's just so hard to be confronted with the reality rather than the either the perceived reality or the mask of reality, or the one that's being made up in order to fit the role of a character, or an actual role, even, fit the role of your role. How do you do that if someone is kind of seeing through you? So that was something that I didn't know I could just embrace, because other people got so defensive with me all the time. I didn't realize that I was doing something that made people feel so insecure, because this for me was just what it was. Like, you're showing me one thing, but I'm picking up on something totally different. So which one, guys? Like, I don't care, you can choose. But if you keep feeling this thing and showing me this thing, my sensitivity is going to get really overwhelmed, and then I would take it personally. I must have done something wrong. I must have done something wrong because they're not able to show me their true self, and now I think of myself as like this innocent child, and I don't know where to go from here, because now someone's angry with me, or they're like, you're too smart for your own good. How many times I got told that when I was a kid? You're too smart for your own good.
Mm.
So does that make it bad? Like, does that make the smartness bad? Because I'm pretty sure it's not just coming from my head. Like, I'm not trying to challenge people. I'm not trying to, like, stand up to an adult with an authority that compromises their integrity. Like, that is not the intention of a small child in this situation, right? So how to allow ourselves the freedom of expression and the sense that it's okay to be sensitive, because if people are always offended by sensitivity in some way or another, is there any place in the world for those of us that are not just feeling it but beginning to express it as well? um, I've only seen so many TED Talks and things connected to HSPs, or a relationship with being an empath that doesn't hold all of the woundedness at the same time. That me sharing this tiny little bit of my story, it's like I can hear it, it's balanced. I'm not in a woundedness about my childhood experiences because of it. And I'm not feeling the victim of the sensitivities either, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there, right? And that it almost feels like when you can't turn them off, then you really do want to talk about them. You want there to be permission for it, because you can't turn them off and they're not going to go anywhere. So is it okay to have them? Is it okay to be accepted with them, without it feeling like you are reading someone like an open book when they're trying to be like the Lord of the Rings series, in which you can pick up on a couple points here and there, but the rest of it's going to be like pretty dense and it's going to be hard to get through, like they want to be like a Lord of the Rings trilogy. And now here you are and you're like, what? You're just the story of the Hobbit. Like, that was easy. They're like, no, it's complex and there's so many things involved in this. And now I want you to see me like this. And you're like, what? You got a ring? Cool. Yay. Yeah, I know I don't really have like something solid that I'm putting into emphasis in the conclusion of this one, but I'm gonna stop talking.
I could not get through Lord of the Rings. I think I read like 10 pages and I was like, what are these characters' names? I don't understand any of it. I am putting this down. Stepping away. Yeah. I got called a sensitive so many times. And even now I still get called sensitive, right? But I like to see it as like a superpower. I don't like to see it as not that I don't like to see it as a weakness, I just don't see it as a weakness. I like the fact that I can be in a grocery store and pick up on how somebody is feeling and have compassion for that person if they're feeling angry, right? As opposed to getting like triggered by their anger because it means something about me and, oh no, I'm so sensitive and now my whole day is ruined. But can we be so sensitive that we can allow another person's emotions to flow through us so we can feel it, but we don't necessarily have to like attach to it or to hold on to it or to make it mean anything? But can we just say, like, I feel what you're feeling. I can feel that you're irritated, right? And that's yours to feel that you're irritated. Like, that's okay. I can be sensitive to your irritation, but I don't need to make it mean something about me. I don't need to take it on, right? And I get a little triggered with this like empath word because I get that it's like kind of thrown around and it's like really popular and oh, I'm an empath and how do we survive the world being an empath? Like, aren't we all empaths? Like, aren't isn't that just how we all are? And some of us just didn't learn to kind of put up a wall again around ourselves. Um, or some of us just became super numb because of conditioning from society and culture and family and whatever. Like, aren't we all empaths? Like, we all have that capacity. We all have mirror neurons. We can all pay attention and feel how another person is feeling, right? We can all become aware of like little micro movements in somebody's face that tells us something about their emotional state or anything else that just happened to them. Just what happened, right? I think it's, I don't know. I just think it's a little bit ridiculous to say that some of us are empaths and some of us aren't. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just me. But no, like who is it? Judith or Lendale, whatever. Like the Empath Survival Guide. Like it just, I have a little bit of judgment towards that. Um, why do we have to take on the victim role if we're also an empath?
Yeah.
Like I don't get that.
Yeah.
I don't resonate with that at all. Yeah.
No.
And sure, like maybe if you're super sensitive and you go into work and, to like a, corporate business and then you have to like meander your way through being sensitive and then dealing with all these people all the time, it's exhausting. Yeah, definitely. So then make a different choice, right? Like change your career. Like I get that that's maybe like easier said than done, but take that emotion of it's like having a message for you and integrate it and make a shift instead of just saying, oh, the world is so hard, the world is so hard, I feel so much, I need to go, live in the forest and live in a cave, right? Like and be a yogi. And I've had that thought many times, and I always see it as a backup. But like yeah, I don't know, can we stop, not about others, but just personally, can we stop looking at being as sensitive as something that's unwanted and just as something that just as purely is, and we're humans, and that's just what being human is. And if one person has had so much trauma that they are not sensitive anymore, that we can have compassion for that and not say that they're, an evil person or whatever, but just have compassion for the life that they've lived, right? I was over summer, a couple summers ago now, I was on this nude beach, the only nude beach where I am. And it's not even where I am, like it's in the city, it's in Vancouver. And for some reason, it was the middle of the week, so it wasn't very packed. And there was like a gang fight that started literally a meter away from where me and my two friends were sitting. And it was two men, and it was something drug based, and they were really beating each other up. Like there was blood and teeth that had fallen out, and it was really, really brutal. And I stood up, and I was half naked, and I am very conscious that I did that purpose, like I was purposely of being half naked and having that as being something that I could use to manipulate another man, right? So he had just thrown a punch and he turned to me, and I was within a meter of him, and I don't know what he said, but he had so much anger in him. And all I could do in that moment was just place my hand on my heart and look at him in the eyes and just say, I'm sorry. And it completely diffused his anger.
Mm.
He didn't say anything. He quickly looked away, but then he also walked away. He walked away from the fight.
Mm.
And I don't know, maybe it was the right moment for him to walk away. Like he felt like, the fight had ended, or maybe having the compassion of a sensitive person, seeing the pain and the fact that he felt that it was okay to so brutally hurt another human being.
Mm.
And to just having somebody apologize. I don't know. I have no idea the impact that I had, but it felt it felt so powerful that I could use my sensitivity to tap into his anger and not respond with anger or trigger and back, but to simply stay in my space of open sensitivity and feel into his anger and just like, I see you, like, it's not okay that you're beating up this other person, but like, I see you and I'm sorry for the pain that you feel.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I see any sort of sensitivities and any ways that we can pick up on emotions of other beings around us, whether they be animal or trees or other humans, as extremely powerful and extremely needed as this time. Any time that we can face another being with deep presence and to see them as they actually are, um, I think can be deeply healing for self in me seeing the other because it's a reflection of myself. So then I can also more deeply see myself, but also in the gift of showing the other that they're being seen.
Mm.
Like it's a mutual healing, right? And in this world where we're so divided and segregated increasingly based on class and money and gender and I'm non-binary and black and white and all of it, right? Like I don't know, I think the more that we can tap into the sensitivities, the more, I don't know, maybe just a return to something that is human in us.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like it creates an appreciation for the emotion without needing to get entangled with the story. I don't need to know why he was so angry at the other guy, or what the story was that led to the fight, or why they chose to beat each other up so violently rather than just a push and shove or whatever it might be, or call your lawyer or something else, right? Like none of it really matters. But in the moment when it's just being witnessed in its raw form, it's super different. It means something. It is connected to that sensitivity because the sensitivity doesn't have a story. It's a feeling, right? And that feeling can connect to emotions. It can also connect to things that are beyond emotions. Sensitivity is there not just for picking up on what we express as a human feeling, but the feelings of animals, the feeling of nature, the feeling of a storm approaching, whatever it might be. There's huge sensitivity to all of it in a way that perhaps it's like the difference between going to school to be a doctor and knowing that then, like, okay, all doctors have a certain skill set, right? But then maybe not that many become brain surgeons. So like we're all maybe like empathic as a doctor, right? We all have a foundation, but maybe some of us are like we're more like brain surgeons with the sensitivity. Like we're just like and like pulling out these little things, and like it can be quite disturbing, but it's also really important. Like it's damn good thing we've got brain surgeons, like they're important people and they deserve to also be recognized for the sensitivity they have in their work, right? Like that's an expertise. And I think the more that we're able to honor that for ourselves, whatever amount of it is that we do feel, it gives us just permissions to see how important and powerful and transformative these things can be, and that it has very little to do with a three-dimensional reality as seen through narrative or physicality. No, I think the last bit that I was just sharing about like sensitivity and kind of like the importance of seeing this as um, something that brings in the diversity and the permission to move beyond the stories, like that I think was the last thing really coming through, to see that yeah, maybe the more that we're sensitive to the big picture, the less the personal story parts hold us in an entanglement of sensitivity, because emotions and story parts get entangled a lot. And then it becomes a personal sensitivity, which is why so many of the people that label themselves empaths have the victimization, because it's still coming from the personal sensitivity. It's hard to get beyond it and experience the sensitivity of the whole. But what you just shared about, this fight that broke out, it's being sensitive to the whole thing. You're not in the personal story parts, and you're not running away scared that these story parts are playing out right in front of you. You're still able to have an interaction with something so different than your own vibration. But being sensitive to the whole thing, it does somehow diffuse these personal sensitivities. He walked away. It wasn't that it was gone. The anger is probably still in him, but in that moment it got diffused from the action. And this change of cause and effect based on action and reaction, or the reactions we have to others' reactions that end up being like the new actions, it's a complicated feedback loop, but it still holds us in these personalizations. So yeah, I think that was the last thing I was just trying to get into a little bit, because yeah, for me, this potential to see beyond oneself, so that no matter what it is you're seeing, there's still a clarity to the expression, even if you don't know what you're doing in the moment. Maybe like it could have gone any way. Maybe he could have turned around and punched you in the face, right? And then you would have just been a part of it. Like, we don't always know what it is that's going to come up. But I think sometimes, like, knowing that we have a sensitivity to the bigger picture is really important to then be a part of the picture. Because you could have walked away. You could have been like, okay, we should leave. Like, let them take care of their thing. Like, we'll go somewhere else, right? And then it just lets things play out. But there is a power in this. As you were saying, it's like a superpower. How did it just do that? How did it just dissolve something so innocently, so authentically, that it didn't have to do anything else other than stand there for just a short moment and watch it happen?
Yeah, I think this play between personal and impersonal is really interesting. And I see it as like a constant dance that we need to go between the two. That, like, sure, I'm here and I have a body and a history, and, my name in my native tongue is Andra, and like all these other things, but like, even so, like, I can be affected by like cosmic energies. I can be influenced by the planets, and I can feel this full moon is really, really powerful, right? Which is not personal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or feeling all the like polarizations that are like being brought up to the surface on a global scale, and in my personal life too, that's not personal, right? But then my experiences of my emotions in my body and how I feel anger and how my nervous system gets wound up when I watch a TV show, like that's a personal experience. But it can also be impersonal, because once I share it with another, just the story of it being shared can also impact another, right? And then maybe it strikes something in them, a remembrance of sorts, that then says, whoa, well, how does anger feel in my body? Or how does grief, and where do I feel that? So I like that there's this constant dance. I remember about a year ago, I shared an experience, and the person that was holding the space, they were like, oh, that's a personal share, or here we go with the personal, or something. Like it wasn't very tactful, to say the least. But it kind of like, it took me back a little bit, and then this dance of personal and impersonal started to like come through a little bit more strongly. But any sort of pattern that we begin to see within ourselves, like, I don't think that that's personal. I think that that's impersonal. And then not necessarily to go into like what is personal and what is impersonal, but just I think to stress the fact that it is a dance between the two. Um, in the way that, the dancer can't be separated from the dancing and the dance itself, that everything is constantly intertwined, and really it's just it's a larger whole. But yeah. Yeah. I think labeling it as a superpower, like that came out in the moment. Now I'm looking back and I think like that's quite amusing. Um, but I think what I really wanted to like express there was just to stop looking at it as a weakness, um, as something that it could be something else.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And I would agree. More and more there's an awareness that highly sensitive people are detrimental to the workplace because of the way they're able to perceive reality and hold a connection to these emotions and the sensory field in a way that is balancing the impersonal and the personal. I think when there is such a heightened sense of feeling things, you can't take them all on as your own. You can't take them all in and believe them to be yours. As a child, I remember going through those motions and really feeling like it must be my fault, because why else would they do this? Why else would I be treated this way if it wasn't something to do with me? Or the version of, okay, fine, be responsible for myself, change my own actions, keep working on myself. What is it that I did that would have been different if I hadn't done it that way? So there's always been that kind of back and forth because of it feeling like a weakness, feeling like there was something wrong with having too much sensitivity to the experience. Not having a hard enough exterior, perhaps, like, oh, if you were this sensitive back in the day when we had to survive through really long winters and there wasn't electricity yet, and all of these different things, you would have died because you're just too sensitive. Or that's the perception, right? Is that you would have been considered the weak one. But that's only one way that we're remembering the story, right? Because if we were to take this same example of what was the past like, but go into more of a tribal culture or a culture that really honors and respects something of, let's say, like the crone energy, the witch, the shaman, the ancestor who is expected to be sensitive in order to help people understand themselves better or the situation that's at hand, this is an honored role. It's a very highly respected role. It's one in which they're going to protect you as best they can because they want you as you are, to be what you are, and to offer that back to the community, because it's an important role. And I feel that this is where nowadays we have a mix from all of these past experiences. Part of it's being honored, part of it's being suppressed, and now we're just trying to find room to be within it in a modern world where a lot of us don't have the same cultural roots that we once did in our ancestral lines, or in the stories that make us feel safe within what it is we're holding. Because yeah, maybe there is this past life fear of being burnt at the stake for having certain sensitivities, because it just instantly makes you a witch if you have it, and nobody wants to think differently or treat you differently than what their fear is speaking. So there still seems to be a lot of fear in this part of letting ourselves feel vulnerable in a moment or express something that's raw, because there's so many other ways we've learned to translate it. Write it down, make a poem out of it, create a song, sing your lyrics about heartbreak, like transmute it, be something different with it. Don't just leave it raw. Or maybe it's just that creative force really loves to transform these raw feelings into something beautiful in whatever way we can. So I feel like we're at early stages of this, and there's a lot more to explore, for ourselves, within ourselves, and with each other. I still feel like these are rare conversations to have with someone in such a deep and honest way about emotions without getting too clinical or over analytical about it, keeping it just partly personal, but also really collective at the same time. Um, so yeah, I've been really grateful for being able to look at this with you.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, me too. Yeah, me too. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the invitation um, and just the space.